The beach was quiet that morning, eerily so. The waves rolled in with a ghostly hush, the kind that blankets the world in silence after something tragic has unfolded. The sky, painted in soft strokes of gray and silver, hinted at rain that hadn't yet come. Only a few seagulls called overhead, circling lazily, uninterested in the solemn stillness below. It was the kind of morning that made people pull their jackets tighter and quicken their steps, sensing something unspoken lingering in the air. Marla Kennedy wasn't one to fear silence. At 57, she had found peace in it, especially during her early morning walks along the coast with her small group of rescue dogs. Each of them had their own tragic stories, and in a way they healed together. The ocean was their safe place, their sanctuary away from noise, pain, and pasts they didn't ask for. This stretch of sand was sacred to her, a place where broken things washed up and sometimes, just sometimes, got a second chance. She had just rounded the bend near the old lifeguard tower when something unfamiliar broke the smooth rhythm of the shore. At first, she thought it was a piece of driftwood or an abandoned pile of wet clothes, until one of her dogs, Luna, a sensitive Labrador mix, stopped walking. Her ears perked. She stared, tail low and unmoving. Marla followed her gaze and saw it. A shape, large, still curled tight like a creature trying to become invisible. Marla's heart caught in her throat. She approached cautiously, her boots sinking into the damp sand. As the wind shifted, she saw clearly what lay before her. A dog. Not just any dog, a German shepherd, crumpled and soaked, his body trembling with each shallow breath. His fur clung to his skin in soaked patches, matted with sand and salt. One of his front legs lay twisted, bent in a way no leg should be. But it was his eyes that stopped her, open, alert, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite explain. Not fear, not aggression, something far more haunting, desperation, but quiet, defeated. She knelt down slowly, not daring to get too close too fast. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, her voice caught between tears and comfort. "It's okay. I'm here." The dog didn't move. His eyes followed her, but he didn't flinch when her hand extended toward him. That was when she saw it. A collar, half buried beneath wet fur, crusted with grime. With gentle fingers, she brushed it clean. The lettering was faded, but she could just make out the name burned into the leather, Chase, and below it a small metal tag clinked softly against the collar. K9, Unit 9B. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just a dog, this was a working dog, a trained K9 unit, police, maybe military, and he was alone. "What happened to you?" she asked softly, stroking the uninjured side of his head. He blinked slowly, as if holding on to consciousness just long enough to understand her presence. She could see the weight of the world behind, those eyes, years of duty, of sacrifice, and something else. Loss. She pulled off her jacket, draping it over him to block the biting wind. Her own dog stood quietly nearby, watching, as if sensing that this wasn't a moment to bark or sniff or wag. Even they seemed to understand the gravity of what was happening. Marla's fingers trembled as she reached for her phone. She dialed. Sam, her partner in their small-town rescue organization, someone who had seen his share of heartbreak. "Sam," she said, barely keeping her voice from breaking. "I found a dog, a canine shepherd. He's hurt, bad, left on the beach like garbage. We need to get him help now. Send me your location. I'll be there in 10, Sam responded without hesitation. She stayed with Chase, sitting cross-legged in the damp sand, letting her warmth bleed into the broken creature beside her. Every few seconds, she whispered reassurances he couldn't understand but hopefully felt. "You're not alone anymore, and you did good, boy. Just hold on a little longer." The tide crept closer, the wind stinging her cheeks, but she didn't move. Time seemed to slow, the way it always does when you're caught between two worlds, between what's dying and what might yet survive. When Sam's truck finally pulled into view, Marla stood and waved frantically. Together they gently bundled, Chase in thick blankets, their faces grim with worry. He didn't resist. His strength was nearly gone, but his eyes stayed locked on Marla like a tether, as if he had chosen her to be the one he trusted even in his weakest hour. They placed him carefully in the back seat, and as Marla slid in beside him, she held his paw, the uninjured one, and whispered, "We've got you now." As they drove away from the lonely shore, the sun finally broke through the overcast sky. A single golden ray slipped through the clouds, falling directly on the spot where Chase had been. It shimmered over the damp sand like a spotlight, a benediction. Sanctum. Beach, once quiet and cold, now felt like a sacred witness to something profound, something broken being given the chance to be whole again. Chase didn't know it, but his story wasn't over, not by a long shot. The road ahead would be hard, filled with pain, healing, memories too sharp to touch, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't facing it alone. He had been left behind, but now, he was found, and that changed everything. The small-town veterinary clinic where they brought Chase wasn't used to emergency cases like his. Dr. Lillian Hayes, a compassionate soul in her 60s with salt and pepper hair and gentle eyes, immediately sensed the weight of the situation. When Marla and Sam carried in the soaked and trembling dog, the reception area fell into stunned silence. Even the usual barking from the kennels in the back seemed to soften, as if the animals inside sensed the broken warrior entering their midst. Marla walked beside the stretcher as Chase was wheeled in. Her hand never left his paw. She'd cleaned off more of the sand during the ride, revealing patches of fur rubbed raw from friction and salt, and bruises in dark hues that painted a story of trauma. But it wasn't until the clinic lights cast down on him that everyone realized just how badly he was hurt. Lillian's voice was calm, but laced with urgency. "Get me warm fluids, pain meds, and prep for x-rays, now." Marla stepped back, her heart thudding as she watched the team swarm around him. She hated feeling helpless, but she knew Chase needed more than love in that moment. He needed medicine, care, and answers. Still, as they moved quickly, the German Shepherd's eyes remained fixed on her. There was no panic in them, only a quiet plea. "Don't go." Sam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He's in the best hands. Lillian's, patched up dogs in worse shape than this." But Marla wasn't sure. Chase didn't look like other rescue dogs. There was a deeper pain in him, not just physical. Something hollow. Haunted. Hours passed like years. Marla sat in the waiting room, her jacket still damp from the beach, fingers gripping a half-empty coffee cup she didn't remember accepting. She kept thinking about that word on the tag, K9. This wasn't just a pet someone abandoned. Chase had a purpose. He served. He had a partner once. And now he was discarded like refuse, left to die on a shoreline with no name and no one looking for him. When Dr. Lillian finally emerged from the examination room, her face was solemn, but not hopeless. He made it through the initial trauma. "He's stable for now." Marla's eyes flooded. "Will he survive?" Lillian hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but he's been through hell. His leg was fractured in 2 places. We've stabilized it, but he may never run like he used to. He has cracked ribs, signs of dehydration, and what looks like long-term emotional trauma. And something else." She handed Marla a clipboard with x-ray results and medical notes. "We found 2 healed bullet wounds." Marla's breath caught. "He's been in combat situations or very close to them," Lillian explained. "I ran the ID from his collar. Chase belonged to a military K9 unit based about 4 states away. But here's the hard part. He was officially listed as decommissioned 2 months ago." "Decommissioned?" Sam echoed, frowning. "You mean retired?" "Yes," Lillian said softly. "But that's not the problem. He was also marked as transferred to civilian care, meaning he was given to someone for adoption, likely his handler or someone in the department." Marla's eyes widened. "Then how did he end up on a beach? Starving?" Lillian shook her head. "That's what we don't know. But this isn't a case of a dog who got lost. This is a dog who was left. The words felt like ice. Marla felt her stomach turn. A dog who had served, protected, been loyal, through war and chaos, abandoned without even a goodbye. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lillian nodded and led her through the clinic's quiet back hallway. The recovery room was dimly lit, filled with soft classical music and the gentle hum of machines. Chase lay on a thick orthopedic bed, hooked up to fluids. His leg was braced and soft bandages lined his chest. But his eyes, those deep, human eyes, opened the second he heard her step in. He tried to lift his head, then let it fall back with a soft huff. His tail thumped weakly once against the blanket. Marla kneeled beside him, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. "You're safe now, boy. You don't have to fight anymore." She rested her hand against his cheek, and for the first time since they'd met, Chase closed his eyes, not out of pain but peace. For the next several days, Marla stayed by his side. She brought him warm broth, sat with him through the night, whispered stories of her own dogs, many of them just as lost as he once was. She learned to read his cues, the twitch of his ears when a loud noise startled him, the way he growled. Softly in his sleep, trapped in memories of gunfire and commands barked in chaos. But slowly, something shifted. His tail wagged more. He began licking her fingers when she arrived. He let the vet techs touch him without flinching. And then one morning, as sunlight streamed into the clinic windows, Chase stood up. Wobbly, cautious but standing, the staff erupted into applause. Marla cried openly. "You stubborn, beautiful soul," she said, laughing through her tears. "You're not done yet, are you?" That day, Marla knew one thing with absolute clarity. Chase wasn't just another rescue. He was family now. He was hers, and she would fight for him with the same fierce loyalty he'd once shown his fellow officers. He had served his country, saved lives. Now someone would finally return the favor. As she stroked his back gently and looked into his eyes, she whispered, "Your story doesn't end in silence on a beach. Not anymore. You have a new mission now, to heal and be loved." And for the first time, Chase didn't look away. He leaned into her touch. Weeks had passed since Chase first opened his eyes in that clinic room, broken and bleeding from a life that had turned its back on him. And yet now, as sunlight poured through the windows of Marla's modest countryside home, it was like watching a soul awaken from a long, restless sleep. Chase lay sprawled on a cushioned dog bed beside the fireplace, the flickering flames dancing shadows across his slowly healing body. His bandages were off. The brace on his leg had been reduced to a supportive wrap. He still limped, yes, but he walked with purpose now, and more importantly, he followed Marla everywhere. From the kitchen to the garden, from the laundry room to the porch, he was her silent shadow. He moved cautiously, sometimes startled by loud noises or sudden movements, but he was learning that this world was softer, gentler than the one he had come from. No more barked orders, no more gunfire or explosions, just the sound of birdsong, the hum of a teapot, and Marla's kind voice reading aloud from a worn book on quiet afternoons. Yet the trauma hadn't vanished. Not entirely. Marla had seen it. Those sleepless nights when Chase would suddenly jolt awake from a nightmare, panting, pacing, eyes wild with fear. He would bark at invisible threats, then look around, confused, trembling. On those nights, Marla would sit beside him on the floor, her hand gently resting over his chest, whispering softly, "It's over, sweet boy. You're safe now. I'm here." Those moments broke her heart a little more each time. But she stayed. She stayed because she knew Chase wasn't just a dog. He was a soldier, a survivor, a protector whose soul had been wounded in ways most people couldn't see. And what he needed now wasn't sympathy. He needed someone to stand beside him while he learned to be whole again. And then came the day that would change everything. It began like any other morning. Marla brewed her coffee while Chase rested at her feet. A soft knock echoed at the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to find Sam, her friend and local animal welfare officer, standing there with a boy she didn't recognize. The child looked no older than 10, with curly black hair, dirt-smudged jeans, and eyes that had clearly seen too much for someone his age. He held tightly onto a stuffed dinosaur, worn and threadbare like a lifeline. "Hey, Marla," Sam said gently. "This is Jordan. His foster family just brought him to town last week. He hasn't spoken much, not since what happened." Marla stepped aside, gesturing them in. "What happened?" she asked softly as they settled on the couch. Sam exhaled. "House fire. He lost both his parents, barely made it out himself. Since then, he's shut down, won't talk, won't play, won't eat unless they force him to." Marla's chest ached. She looked down at Jordan, who stared blankly at the coffee table, unmoving. "I thought maybe," Sam continued, eyes shifting toward the dog bed, "if there was one soul who might understand what he's going through." Chase had lifted his head. His ears pricked. His eyes, still golden and wise, locked onto the boy with eerie stillness. Slowly, silently, Chase rose to his feet. The limp was still there, but it didn't stop him. He stepped across the room, paws gentle against the wood floor, and stood before Jordan. The boy didn't move. Then Chase did something no one expected. He leaned forward and rested his head softly against Jordan's small chest. Time seemed to pause. Jordan's fingers twitched. He didn't flinch, didn't back away. Slowly, he raised his hand and buried it into Chase's thick fur, still silent, still solemn. But something cracked. A single tear slid down Jordan's cheek, and Chase stayed, there unmoving, steady, a guardian in canine form, offering comfort not with words but with presence. Marla swallowed the lump in her throat. From that day forward, everything changed. Jordan began visiting daily, sometimes accompanied by his social worker, sometimes alone. At first, he didn't speak, but he would sit with Chase for hours, brushing his fur, showing him the dinosaur toy, sometimes just lying beside him on the rug. Chase, in return, never left his side. Wherever Jordan went in the house, Chase followed. When the boy tripped one day in the yard and skinned his knee, Chase immediately nosed at him, whined and barked until Marla came running. The bond between them was indescribable. And then came the moment Marla would never forget. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Jordan and Chase sat together on the porch swing, Marla sipping tea nearby with a book in her lap. The breeze carried the scent of blooming lilacs. Birds chirped in the distance. Suddenly, a soft voice cut through the silence. "Chase." Marla's heart stopped. She looked up. Jordan had spoken. His voice was cracked and hoarse, but it was there. He looked down at the German shepherd beside him. "Chase," he said again, this time more clearly. "You're my best friend." Tears welled up in Marla's eyes. Sam, who had just arrived at the gate, froze with his jaw slightly agape. "Did you hear that?" Marla whispered. Sam nodded slowly. "I think the whole world just heard that." From then on, it was as if Chase had unlocked something within the boy, a key that no therapist, no medication, no adult could have ever provided. Jordan began speaking more, smiling more, playing more. His laughter filled the house. He and Chase would play fetch in the yard, curl up together for naps, and even fall asleep beneath the stars on warm nights, huddled under a blanket. They were two wounded hearts, healing each other in ways no one could explain. And Marla? She just watched with silent gratitude, knowing now more than ever, Chase had never been just a dog, he had a mission. And this was it. Not war, not chasing criminals, but helping one broken soul find his voice again. The clouds had begun to roll in slowly, the kind of gray skies that whispered of something bigger approaching. Marla stood at the kitchen window, her hand cradling a warm mug of chamomile tea, watching the wind lift leaves into the air and swirl them across the front yard. The news had warned of a severe thunderstorm sweeping in from the coast, and judging by the sudden drop in temperature and the eerie silence that followed the birds' retreat, it was coming faster than expected. Inside the house, Chase was curled, up near the door, his ears twitching at every gust of wind. Jordan sat beside him with his favorite book in hand, reading aloud, his voice still soft but no longer fragile. Every now and then he paused to look at Chase and smile, like sharing a secret only they understood. "Do you think dogs know when a storm is coming?" Jordan asked, glancing at Marla. She nodded. "They do. Their instincts are strong. Chase probably senses it already." The dog gave a low grunt as if in agreement and gently rested his head on Jordan's lap. The boy giggled, brushing a hand through his thick fur. The storm hit just after dinner. At first it was the rain, sharp, fast, and relentless, slamming against the windows like a million tiny fists. Then came the wind, howling through the trees, like a chorus of ancient ghosts. Finally, thunder cracked the sky wide open, sending tremors through the floorboards. Jordan stiffened. His eyes widened as he dropped his spoon back into his bowl of soup. The thunder had stirred something inside him, something he hadn't felt in weeks. Panic. His breaths came faster, shallower. He looked around the room, unsure, overwhelmed. Chase stood immediately. He stepped toward Jordan and pressed his body against the boy's legs, grounding him. No barking, no growling, just calm, quiet presence. Jordan wrapped his arms around Chase's neck and buried his face in the fur. "I don't like it," he whispered, voice cracking. "I don't like storms." Marla crouched beside them, placing a reassuring hand on his back. "You're safe. Here, Jordan. The house is strong, and Chase won't let anything hurt you." Another flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by a deafening boom. The lights flickered once, twice. Then everything went dark. Jordan let out a small gasp. "The lights! What happened?" "The power's out," Marla said gently, rising to grab the emergency lanterns from the hallway closet. She set one in, the center of the room casting a soft yellow glow that barely reached the edges of the walls. Chase remained steady. He didn't panic. Instead, he moved closer to Jordan, sat beside him, and leaned into his side, radiating warmth and security. That dog didn't need to speak. His very presence told the boy, "I'm here, you're not alone. We'll get through this." They set up camp in the living room that night, blankets spread on the floor, flashlights nearby, a stack of books for company. Marla lit a few candles and turned on her battery-powered radio to softly play classical music, hoping the sounds would ease the tension. As the storm raged outside, Jordan rested his head against Chase's back. His small fingers traced the patches of fur that had once been scarred and matted, but now glistened under Marla's care. He looked up at her, his eyes wide and honest. "Do you think Chase had to be brave like this before? In the war?" Marla sat down across from them and nodded slowly. "Yes, I think he's always been brave, but I also think he was lonely, like you were, like you still are sometimes." Jordan stayed quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. Then he whispered, "I'm not lonely when he's here." That night, Jordan didn't wake up screaming. He didn't shake or cry like he had during the last thunderstorm. Instead, he slept curled up beside Chase, the two of them a tangle of warmth and trust. The storm came and went, lashing the house with all its fury, but it could not shake what had been built inside. By morning, the clouds had lifted, leaving behind the quiet aftermath only a storm could produce, the kind that washes the world clean. Birds returned, singing hesitantly from the trees. Sunlight streamed through the windows, touching the room like a blessing. Marla entered the living room and froze. Jordan was still asleep, his arm draped over Chase's back. The dog's head was resting on the boy's chest, their breathing perfectly, synchronized. In that moment, Marla saw not a boy and a dog, but two hearts healing each other in silence, finding safety in shared pain. She gently woke them. "Breakfast is ready," she whispered, brushing the hair from Jordan's forehead. He stirred and blinked, his gaze still foggy from sleep. "Did the storm stop?" "It's gone," she smiled. "You weathered it." Jordan looked at Chase and grinned. "We weathered it." As the day wore on, the three of them ventured into the backyard. The rain had soaked the earth, turning the grass into a sponge, but the sun was warm and golden. Jordan chased a ball across the yard while Chase trotted after him. Not as fast. As before, still limping slightly, but he moved with joy now, not pain. His tail wagged, his ears perked, his eyes sparkled. Marla watched from the porch, her heart full. Then came the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was Sam again, holding a clipboard and wearing a strange expression, somewhere between hope and hesitation. "Got a minute?" he asked. Marla nodded and followed him to the porch steps. He handed her the clipboard. "There's been a request to place Jordan permanently with a new foster family across the state. They've got space, resources, they're good people." Her heart skipped. "When?" she asked, barely able to speak. "Next week?" She looked out at the yard where Jordan knelt in the grass, throwing sticks for Chase. The boy's laughter echoed across the field. Chase leapt, not far, not fast, but enough. Enough to feel like himself again. "I can't separate them," Marla whispered, her throat tightening. Sam's eyes softened. "Then don't." She looked at him, surprised. "Apply? To adopt him, Marla. You've already given him what no system could: stability, love, a home. And that dog, I think he's part of the reason the boy is even smiling again." Marla felt tears brim in her eyes. She looked at Chase, then at Jordan. It wasn't just about saving a boy or healing a dog. It was about building a new life, together, and she knew then, in her soul, that this storm hadn't torn them apart. It had brought them closer. The day was still and golden, the kind that carries a softness in the air, like the world had finally decided to breathe after holding itself too tightly. The storm had passed, but the changes it brought were far from over. Marla stood on the front porch, her fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, watching as Jordan played in the grass with Chase. Each moment between them had become a symphony of healing, silent, slow, but no less powerful. It had been a week since Sam handed her that clipboard, 7 days since she made the decision that, for the first time in a long time, made her feel like the ground beneath her feet was steady again. She remembered how her hand had trembled when signing the papers, how her heart had pounded, not out of fear but from the overwhelming certainty that this was right. This wasn't just about taking in a foster child anymore. This was about choosing love over fear, family over doubt, healing over silence. Inside the house, taped carefully to the refrigerator with a paw print magnet, was the official document. That made it real. Jordan was hers, legally, emotionally, forever. And Chase, the old K9 who once stared down the weight of war and abandonment, had found a new mission, one that didn't require commands or uniforms, only heart. Today was special. Today was Chase's adoption day, too. Marla had scheduled a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just something simple to mark a moment that none of them would forget. Balloons swayed gently in the kitchen, their strings tied to chairs and cabinet handles. A welcome home Chase banner hung above the window, and on the counter sat a dog-friendly cake made from peanut butter, pumpkin, and oats shaped like a bone. Jordan helped her decorate the living room earlier that morning. He had insisted on making Chase a party hat out of blue construction paper. It sat crookedly on the dog's head now as he trotted through the grass, tail wagging with a lopsided grin, completely unbothered by the hat or the world. "Come on, Chase," Jordan shouted with laughter. "You gotta wear your hat, it's your special day." Marla called them in from the porch. "Lunchtime and cake after." Jordan raced up the steps, panting and flushed with joy, and Chase followed, slower, still, favoring his left side, but not with the same pain as before. The limp that once defined him was now just a reminder of what he had survived. They sat together at the kitchen table, and Marla lit a single candle on the little cake before placing it gently in front of Chase. "Go on," she whispered, her voice thick with love. "Make a wish, old boy." Chase tilted his head, then looked at Jordan, who leaned in and blew out the candle for him. "He doesn't need to wish," the boy said confidently. "He already has everything now." They clapped, and Chase barked once in excitement, making everyone laugh. The meal passed with laughter, stories, and memories being built in real time. It was nothing extravagant. No big speeches, no fancy guests. Just a boy, a dog, and a woman whose heart had been cracked open wide enough to let love pour back in. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip, Jordan asked if they could go to the beach. The same beach where Chase had first been found, cold and alone, half buried in the sand and shivering with more than just the cold. Marla hesitated at first. It felt sacred somehow, like going back to the beginning could stir up ghosts. But Jordan looked up at her, his hand resting on Chase's back, and she couldn't say no. They drove in silence, windows down, the salty air rushing in like a blessing. When they arrived, Jordan jumped out first, racing ahead with his sneakers already sinking into the sand. Chase followed, his pace measured but eager. Marla walked slowly behind them, soaking in the view, the sun casting golden trails across the ocean, the wind lifting strands of her hair, the sound of waves crashing against the shore with calm authority. They reached the spot, the exact stretch of sand where Chase had once been found. Jordan crouched beside him and placed a small stick in the sand, marking the moment with childlike reverence. "This is where you started over, huh, buddy?" he whispered. Chase sniffed the sand, then looked up at the boy and licked his cheek. Marla stood a few feet away, watching them. She couldn't stop the tears this time. So much had changed. This dog, once a K9 soldier trained for war, left to face death alone, had become the beating heart of their new little family. He had given Jordan more than comfort. He had given him strength, the kind that doesn't come from therapy or medicine, but from a connection deeper than words, from knowing someone has stayed when everyone else walked away. Jordan picked up a rock and threw it toward the surf. "Do you think Chase remembers being here?" "I think he does," Marla said softly. "But I also think he remembers what came after even more." Chase stood beside Jordan and stared out at the horizon. His body was still lean, still strong. His fur glistened in the sunlight, and his eyes, they no longer held the haunted, empty glaze of before. They were alive now, bright, alert, full of purpose. The wind picked up, swirling sand around their feet. Marla walked over and placed a hand on both their shoulders. "You both saved each other." Jordan nodded. I think Chase is my guardian now," she smiled. "He always has been." The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the sand. Chase lay down, resting his head on Jordan's feet, eyes closing slowly. Not from exhaustion, but from peace. The kind of peace only those who've survived the worst can ever truly appreciate. And in that moment, with the ocean humming its eternal lullaby and the breeze carrying the scent of salt and safety, Marla realized something. Chase had never stopped serving. His mission had simply changed. He was no longer a K9, soldier trained to detect threats or run into battle. He was now a guardian of healing, a silent anchor for a boy learning to smile again. A partner in grief, a teacher of resilience, a gentle giant who proved that even after the deepest betrayals, the heart could find its way back to trust. And maybe, just maybe, this beach wasn't where Chase's life had almost ended. It was where it truly began. As they walked back toward the car, Jordan turned to look back one last time. "We should come here every year," he said. "Like a celebration." Marla nodded. "We will." She watched as the boy opened the back door and Chase climbed in slowly, curling into the seat with a satisfied sigh. Jordan followed, curling beside him. Marla took the driver's seat and looked at them through the rearview mirror. Two souls, one journey, and the promise of forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Let more people know the power of love, loyalty, and second chances. Subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us that even the broken can be healed with just a little love.